The story began with a sudden storm. Artist David, who was working, looked out at the worsening weather. He decided to take his wife Stephanie and son Billy to the basement for the night. Not long after they left, a tree from the neighbor's yard crashed through his studio. The next morning, David discovered that the storm had not only destroyed most of the boathouse, but also left something strange. An eerie mist pouring down from the mountains. They had never seen such a phenomenon before. David decided to drive into town to buy supplies, but before that, he wanted to talk to his neighbor Brent about compensation. Brent was a well-known lawyer in town, and taking advantage of him was never easy. Yet this time, Brent surprisingly agreed to pay for the damages. The reason was that his own car had been crushed by a tree, so he needed to borrow David's vehicle to buy his own supplies. On their way, they noticed military vehicles rushing toward the descending mist. David didn't think much of it. His only concern was stocking up at the supermarket before the weather grew worse. The store was crowded with people. While David was chatting with other customers, a military police officer suddenly walked in. Their presence usually meant something serious. Sure enough, the next second, a loud emergency siren blared across the town. People looked outside in confusion, not knowing what was happening. At that moment, a panicked local man named Dan, blood on his face, burst into the supermarket and frantically warned everyone that something terrifying was hiding in the mist. David's son Billy was terrified, urging him to go home immediately. The customers turned to look outside, only to see the mist rapidly engulfing the area. A man tried to escape by car, but before he could open the door, the fog swallowed him whole. A moment later, his agonized screams echoed back. The supermarket mechanic Jim panicked and slammed the door shut. Soon, the store was completely covered by the mist. Some guessed it might be a chemical leak from a nearby plant, but the emergency siren suddenly stopped, and the ground began to shake violently, as if a colossal creature was striding past overhead. When the rumbling finally ceased, everyone started to believe Dan's story and decided to remain inside the supermarket to wait for rescue. During the commotion, one distraught woman insisted on getting home to her children. When nobody dared to accompany her, she went alone into the mist. While the group sheltered inside, the store's generator malfunctioned. A young bagger named Norm volunteered to go out through the loading bay to clear the clogged vent, despite David's warning that it was dangerous. As soon as Norm opened the door, a thick tentacle whipped inside, seized him, and violently dragged him into the mist, horrifying everyone. David and a few others managed to slam the door shut, but Norm was gone, presumed dead. The witnesses were shocked, while others refused to believe what they hadn't seen. David and Ollie explained the attack, but only a few believed that deadly creatures lurked outside. Brent Norton and others dismissed it as mass hysteria. The believers decided to take precautions. They fortified the storefront with heavy pet food and fertilizer bags, sealed the gaps with tape, and made improvised torches to defend themselves. Brent Norton still scoffed at the danger. Convinced that everyone was overreacting, he gathered a small group of skeptics to leave the supermarket for help, ignoring David's pleas. One biker offered to fetch a shotgun from his truck. To track his progress, David tied a long rope around the man's waist. Then Brent and the others stepped into the mist and vanished. Moments later, the rope went taut with a violent jerk, then suddenly slackened. When the group pulled it back, they were horrified to find only the bloody lower half of the biker's body. This gruesome sight proved that monsters were truly inside the mist. Immediately afterward, blood-curdling screams rang out from the fog. It was clear that Brent and the rest of his group had also been attacked, and none of them made it back. By nightfall, the supermarket was running on backup generator power. At that time, swarms of giant flying insects were drawn to the bright lights, buzzing and clustering all over the store's windows. When one of the windows shattered, countless giant insects and reptilian bird-like predators poured into the supermarket, attacking the trapped shoppers. Panic erupted as survivors fought back desperately. One man tried to use a burning mop as a torch, but accidentally set himself on fire and suffered severe burns. 2 more people were killed in the chaos, including a young cashier named Sally, who was stung by a giant bug and died from its venom. Through all the madness, Mrs. Carmody cowered in a corner, muttering prayers without pause. Amazingly, she came out completely unharmed, even when a giant insect landed on her before flying away without touching her. Many survivors took her survival as a divine sign. Her credibility grew, and more frightened people began to listen to her frenzied preaching. After the horrific attack, calm individuals like the elderly teacher Irene tended to the wounded. Meanwhile, Mrs. Carmody grew louder, declaring the mist to be God's punishment and insisting that Judgment Day had come. She hinted that only human sacrifices could appease God and drive the mist away, an idea that horrified David and the rational survivors. As fear deepened, more and more people started following her. Even those who once doubted her, like the mechanic Jim, gave in and joined her cult-like circle. Among the survivors was a badly burned man who urgently needed medicine. David decided to lead a small team to the pharmacy next door for supplies. He chose Ollie, Dan, Irene, and several other men to accompany him. The group dashed through the fog into the pharmacy, where they found sticky web-like strands everywhere and bodies cocooned by creatures. Suddenly, spider-like monsters the size of dogs attacked, spraying acidic webbing. 2 men were killed. One's leg was horribly corroded by acid, while another was bitten, injected with venom, and died almost instantly. David and the rest fought back fiercely, then retreated, racing back to the supermarket empty-handed and shaken. The failure worsened the group's despair. Mrs. Carmody, who had opposed the trip from the start, seized the moment to declare that leaving the store had angered God and caused divine punishment. She tightened her grip on the crowd, assuring her growing flock that as long as they stayed inside and prayed, they would remain under God's protection. Among the trapped people were 3 soldiers from the nearby Arrowhead base. By the next day, 2 of them had themselves in the storage room out of fear and guilt. At dawn, the last soldier, Private Wayne Jessup, was dragged before the crowd by Carmody's followers, who demanded answers. Under their pressure, Jessup broke down. He confessed that the Arrowhead Project had tried to open a portal to another dimension, but something went terribly wrong, unleashing creatures into the world. The revelation drove the mob into a frenzy. They beat Jessup savagely, and one man stabbed him repeatedly with a knife. The wounded soldier was then shoved outside as a sacrifice. A monstrous praying mantis-like creature emerged from the mist and devoured him on the spot, horrifying the onlookers. By then, Mrs. Carmody had complete control over most of the survivors. David realized that if he stayed any longer, he and his friends would be the next sacrifices. At first light, he secretly prepared to escape with his son Billy, Amanda, Irene, Dan, Ollie, and a few others who refused to join Carmody's cult. But when they tried to leave, Carmody and her zealots blocked the exit with knives and weapons. Carmody shrieked that Billy and Amanda had to be sacrificed next, and that the others should be killed as well. As her followers closed in, Ollie pulled out the revolver Amanda had given him earlier and shot Carmody twice, killing her instantly. Her corpse fell to the floor, and her stunned followers froze. As if waking from a nightmare, they backed away in silence and scattered, leaving a path clear for David and his group to escape through the supermarket's front doors. David and his group dashed into the mist-covered parking lot, racing toward his SUV. The dense fog made it almost impossible for them to see one another. Just as they neared the vehicle, the giant praying mantis-like creature reappeared and lunged at the group, seizing Ollie and tearing him apart. At the same time, 2 other members, Myron and Ambrose, were attacked by the smaller spider-like creatures hiding in the fog and were brutally killed. Seeing this, Manager Bud completely lost his nerve. He turned and ran back to the supermarket in terror, where the people inside let him back in. Despite the losses, David grabbed his son Billy and fought to get Amanda, Dan, and Irene to the vehicle. The 5 survivors climbed into David's truck, locked the doors, and sped out of the parking lot, driving away from the supermarket. David did not leave town immediately. First, he drove to his home to check on his wife, Stephanie. The sight that greeted him filled him with despair. His house had been destroyed, and Stephanie's lifeless body was cocooned in layers of webbing, showing she had fallen victim to the spider-like creatures. Overwhelmed with grief, David got back in the car and continued driving south with the others, choking back his sorrow as he hoped to outrun the mist and find a chance of rescue. As they traveled, they witnessed stunning sights. The town and the surrounding area lay in ruins, as if an apocalypse had swept through. While crossing a road, they saw an enormous 6-legged creature, hundreds of feet tall, lumbering through the mist across their path, so colossal it defied human comprehension. The appearance of this gigantic being underscored the bleakness and helplessness of their situation. Still, David kept driving until his SUV ran out of gas after many miles, coming to a halt on a fog-shrouded rural highway. At that point, the 5 people in the car were stranded in the endless mist with no fuel, no escape, and no hope of rescue in sight. After agonizing deliberation, they accepted a desperate solution. Rather than wait to be torn apart by monsters, they would choose a quick and merciful end. With tears in his eyes, David raised the revolver, which had only 4 bullets left, and resolved to give his companions and his child a painless release himself, rather than let them fall into the creature's claws. In utter despair, he shot each of the other survivors in the car, Amanda, Dan, and Irene, and finally took the life of his own young son, Billy. As the gunshots echoed inside the vehicle, the 4 companions slumped lifelessly one by one. With all bullets spent, David was left alive alone, trembling with agony and shock. He then stumbled out of the car, intending to let the creatures come and take him. Moments after David stepped out of the car and cried out in despair, the mist around him began to slowly lift. A beam of bright light cut through the fog as the vague shape of an armored tank came into view, accompanied by the rumble of engines and the clanking of treads breaking the silence. As the mist cleared, a U.S. Army armored convoy appeared on the road. Tanks and armored personnel carriers rolled forward, and soldiers used flamethrowers and weapons to burn away the spiderwebs and shoot the remaining creatures, gradually retaking control of the area. David watched the military move past in stunned disbelief. He saw that the soldiers' trucks were filled with survivors, including the same woman who had left the supermarket alone at the start of the disaster to find her children. In that instant, David was struck by a cruel realization. Had they held out for just a few more minutes, everyone would have been saved, and he had just killed his own son and friends moments before help arrived. Upon this realization, David collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by immeasurable guilt and despair.